every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. Welcome to the John Schultz podcast. My first podcast of 2025. I'm still here, still grinding away, trying to create content for everyone to love, enjoy, and learn from. And I'm excited to have a guest who I've known for a very long time. And he's a gentleman and a good friend and just a good person all the way around. It's Bill Greenblatt. Say hi, Bill.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Yeah, everything's good. So let me give a little intro here. So Bill is very accomplished. He's an entrepreneur, a business leader. You know, he's recognized as the pioneer of the background screening business. You know, it just shows you there's so many businesses out there that for whatever reason you ended it, you can scale and grow to a giant business over the long term. It started out as Sterling Polygraph Systems. Oh my God, I feel like James Bond or, polygraph. I haven't heard that in a long time. And he started it in law school. His first year, he landed his first client, The Wiz, which we all know that company from a long time ago. And then it morphed into Sterling Infosystems because I guess there was a law change that no more polygraphs, which is sort of interesting. We'll learn about that. It operates globally, US, Canada, Europe, and Asia. So talk about scaling something to a large audience. And now recently founded Montague Street Private Partners, which is an investment firm, which we're going to discuss. But what I think is the coolest thing he did is he just authored his first book, Every Day Sucks. Now, there's a message behind that, right? But when I saw that title, I'm like, you know what? I totally get it, and I'm looking forward to hearing the stories behind that. So welcome again, Bill, and we're so happy to have you on the show. So we're going to start out early. If I look back at the 80-plus episodes I've done, a lot of the habits and even triggers of what creates that person happens when they're young. So how can you describe yourself growing up? And, how do you think your childhood shaped you, like as you moved along in your early life?
So there's no question my childhood shaped me, because I actually believe that childhood shapes everyone. You have this DNA, whether it's your personality, whether it's your habits around spending money, whether it's your work habits, your study habits, everything is influenced by your upbringing. My grandparents came from Russia, and they came to this country without a penny in their pockets. My grandmother, on my father's side, worked at the New York City post office on 34th Street for her entire life. Her husband died when she was 28 years old. Wow. My dad was 10. So she had, a very rough life. She never got remarried. And my dad was left on the streets of Brooklyn, left to his own volition. So that impacts my thinking. And, as a kid growing up, my dad had a job. We weren't poor by any means, but we were closer to poor than we were to rich. And money was a constant vocal point in my house growing up. My parents would fight about money all the time. My father would want to do something. My mother would say no. My father would want to do something. My mother would say no. My father wanted to do something. My mother never said yes to anything. So I grew up in a very, very cheap, frugal, money-oriented life and world. And, work was important. I started delivering newspapers when I was 13 years old. Worked in a stereo store in high school, did that for 5 years, and, learned how to save money. And, I still have my first South Shore Federal Savings and Loan Bank passport from the first $5 I ever made.
Wow. Well, and how funny is that? Because, like, for you being that money was this thing that didn't feel abundant, like the thing you saved was that, right? Like, it's amazing how what we do based on how we grow up. The other sort of theme that I've seen through most of these podcasts is most of my guests somehow, way, shape, or form work when they were younger. They did something, and I thought what was interesting about you, you scaled a global business. Not many people do that, Bill. So you should be proud of yourself. Is even on your paper route, you subcontracted out part of it to someone else and made 20% of their take, which is the first time you scaled something. If you really look at it in
I
that way.
guess it was more an accident because I was offered the route and I accepted it. And when I came home and I told my mother that I accepted it, she was like, "No way. It takes too much time. You've got to study. You've got to be home doing your homework." So
But you figured it out. You
called
made
my
it
friend
work.
Peter Fortune and I said to him, "Hey, Peter, you want to do this? I know you wanted it." He goes, "But," I said, "but you got to give me 20%." And he was like, "Fine." And that was the whole negotiation. And it was kind of like, wow,
But
learn
you
a
did
lot.
it. It was your first scaling moment. So, okay, your father, I guess, did shopping, or he went into stores and he basically would check out the inventory, and they called him Jerry the detective. So, is that why? Like, you're in the screening business, right? What gets someone into the screening business? I also want to, you started in college, you went to college. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur throughout, but what pushed you there?
So as a kid, my dad would take me every Friday afternoon to the New York World's Fair. And the World's Fair was one of his clients. And what the mystery shopping service did was try to find people working as cashiers at a retail level to see if they were stealing.
Okay.
So he would give me rolls of quarters. And, this is 1964 and 1965. And so I'm 7 and 8 years old at the time. And he gives me, rolls of quarters, and I walk up to buy Italian ices. And I would buy the Italian ices, and I was trained. If they clicked the cash register and the register opened and it said 0.25, and then they closed the register drawer, you knew that sale was recorded properly. If nothing happened and they just took the 25 cents and threw it into the till and gave you your ices, you knew that the person was stealing. By the time I was 8, I probably caught 300 people stealing. I would signal my dad, and he had a crew of professional interrogators that would come and shut the cash register down and then go question the person who violated policy. And it was like a revolving door. I mean, these people, you don't realize it. When you were 7 or 8 years old, you didn't think about how everybody in business was stealing.
No.
But I was like, okay, this is what people do. And it makes you a little jaded. It kind of makes you hardened. And when you grow up later on, you're like, can I really trust this person? So developing the ability to trust people later on in life was complex to me.
That's amazing. So how sometimes you'll be in a group, and to get to know people, when you're in a group, breaking the ice. So, they'll say, like, what's a fun fact about you? And then you really see, like, these weird, cool things that you never think someone would do. So with you, and this is, I'm thinking, could be one of your fun facts, like, what motivated you to attend a lie detector school in college? It's like, that would be the last thing I would ever think of if I was in college.
So again, it was my dad. He had a friend, his name was Vic Kaufman. And my dad, had known him for years and had done Vic a lot of favors over the years, and vice versa. And Vic said to him, "Send your son to school. I won't charge you anything." So again, being deep rooted, in this frugal mentality, anything that was free was okay. So my dad said, you can go to lie detector school. Now I'm an English major in college.
Yeah, like, dude, like,
intending to go to law school.
Yeah.
And my dad says, go to lie detector school. So I went to lie detector school. My parents, they were good parents. They loved my brother and I. They were always,
Yeah.
I don't have psychological scars and issues, about how I was raised. So my dad
Right.
says go, I go. And the first day I finished lie detector school, I wind up getting an account. And on the way back, I was getting on the subway and I get an account. And,
That's so
you know,
funny. So what would you say is the most valuable lesson, challenge that you really went through as a young person that still influences you today and maybe gives you some type of on what you did to achieve what you achieved?
so look, we talk about this all the time with a lot of different people, but everybody has a money DNA. It's like a fingerprint. And I was hugely impacted by the lack of money. And, I listen, sometimes I have these conversations with my own children. And, I listen to, a lot of different people's stories. And, you go and you read books and you see Broadway plays. And, there's a whole philosophy that money, is the root of all evil. But it causes stress in your life. It enables you to do things both good and spectacular. And it solves so many problems that life throws at you. And, you look at the societal issues that we have today, and, you look at the wars that are ongoing since the beginning of time, and it's really all about money and power.
Yeah,
And
it's a shame.
so I wanted to put myself, and this was not a deep rooted strategy, that I spent, decades in a think tank coming up.
Right.
It's like, hey, I want to go to the Jet game. Tickets are $6.50. My father said no. I'm like, okay, how am I going to go to the Jet game? I got to go get a newspaper out so I can buy my ticket to the Jet game. And, as I got older, it was like, okay, if I do this, I get that. And I remember having a great conversation when I was in law school with a kid. He was Israeli. He had a hot dog stand on the corner of 5th Avenue and 13th Street. And we would eat knishes and hot dogs for lunch. We'd come out of class, we'd buy a Sabaray hot dog, we'd get a fried knish, it was $1 or whatever. And he would say to us all the time, you guys are out of your minds. Like, these are the 3 best years of your life. Money compounds. If you could make $25,000 a year and you can save half of it, you can then invest that. And that's 3 years, that's $75,000. You're paying 12 grand to go to law school. That's 36 grand. So you're losing 36 grand, then you're losing 36 grand that you could have saved. That's $72,000. And interest rates were very high then. Because on the $72,000, you could be making $15,000 a year. You're going to go get a job when you get out of law school that's going to pay you 30 grand. Think about that.
Well, think about that. It's like, but you could have listened to that or not listened to that. And it's just amazing how people come into our lives based on what I think the energy we project out onto the world. And then messages come and either you believe in them and listen to them and pursue them, or you don't. And listen, not having money could have made you bitter and not strive to figure out how to get that paper route going to go to the Jets game. So I just wish, hope people listen to this, that, nothing's easy, nothing's what it seems, but be open to, what you hear and know that, like, things are for you, not against you. All right. So
let me just expand on that a little bit, because
go ahead.
I kind of did listen to this guy, and obviously I'm 67 years old now, and I'm remembering something that somebody told me when I was 22. Okay. But by the time I finished my second year of law school, I worked full time. I never went to class my third year of law school. I was just working. And, fortunately for me, I didn't know this at the time, but I had skills. I had talent. I had a work ethic. And I was able to make more money in my third year of law school than I ever imagined. And I recognized that the more I worked, the harder I worked, the more money I could make. It was a
Right.
direct correlation, because if I wanted to sell for 10 hours, I would get more customers than if I sold for 5 hours.
Yep.
And, at the time I was selling and doing the lie detector tests myself, and I didn't have a minute to breathe.
Listen, it was your DNA. I mean, and what was cool, because I also know that your father would always say, you have to work for yourself. You have to work for
Well,
yourself.
he didn't always say that,
Okay.
because my father had a job his entire life. My
Yeah.
mother would never let him
Got it.
go into his own business. He had an entrepreneurial itch, and it was thwarted.
Well, but he didn't do it, but I think he told you to do that.
But he got fired from his job.
Oh,
He worked
wow.
for somebody.
Okay.
He worked for somebody for a very long time. He was the top sales guy. Ultimately, became president of this guy's company. It was a small company.
Yeah.
It's about 25 people.
Got it.
And this guy, Nat Glazer, sold the business. He sold the business to a Fortune 500 company. It was the Walter Kidder Corporation,
Yeah.
KIDDE. It's still around. They make fire extinguishers,
Yeah.
ironically. And the first thing they did when they bought the business is they fired the guy who made the most money, because they paid for it and they wanted to,
Yeah.
synergize it down to a less expensive, cost basis.
Yeah.
And my dad was mad.
Yeah.
He got screwed for being good and hardworking and loyal and dedicated.
Yeah.
And he was just like, this was not a lifelong lesson that he taught me always.
Got it.
This was a one-night event where he was like, whatever you do, never work for somebody. He
It's
was
amazing, right? Like
it was
all these
emotional.
little things. It guides us to our promised land. All right, so you did Sterling Polygraph Systems out of law school. Obviously, one of the questions I was going to ask you, how'd you balance your studies? Well, you didn't. You did what you had to do to make a lot of money, and you obviously got through it, right? So
Yeah, and I did pass the bar, but I never practiced law a day in my life. I never even put a resume together. I never went on an interview for a job.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So all right, so you're leaving college, you're kicking this thing off. Give us a little sort of journey of the first 5 years, and like what were some of the challenges? Because now you're full time, right? You're not balancing all these things as we do when we grow up, not really knowing what we're going to do. And for entrepreneurs, knowing how hard it is, and that every day sucks, which we'll talk about, comes with that feeling every day. What was the journey of the first 5-10 years of this?
So I'm getting goosebumps thinking about my answer to this question, because this is gonna hit home with you.
Okay.
Because it's gonna be really ironic.
Okay.
But who were the retailers, John, in New York City and the Bronx and Brooklyn back in the early 70s and the late 70s? They were Syrians.
Yes.
Every retailer in New York City, whether it was Crazy Eddie, whether it was The Wiz, whether it was Dwayne Reed, whether it was Jack's Bargain Stores or Jack Mel, or they were all Syrian retailers. And they are killers. You would go to work for them, nothing was ever good enough, and they didn't pay you.
Right. Okay.
But they loved me.
Right.
They absolutely loved me. They loved the fact that my wife grew up in Deal.
Yeah.
And they loved the fact that I knew everything about their community. And I would get a customer on, in the Bronx. And by the time I got back, to my office in New York City, I would get a call from David Cohn in Brooklyn, and I would get a call from Eli Harari, and I would get a call from Abe Terzi. And I mean, it was like word of mouth just started that this guy's good. You got to use this guy. And
listen, retail, you got to know who's working for you, right? I mean, it goes all the way back to you going to the World Fair, which I can't believe you act like you went to the World Fair. That's funny. That people are gonna have to like Google what is that, right? So and you found the right niche, right? So
I found the right niche, and the business flew. It took off like crazy. I was, By the time, literally, by the time I finished law school, I had 3 employees.
It's amazing. So what were some of the challenges? Because like a flying business needs to have execution.
Oh, some of the challenges was that, oh my God.
And
I had
what
no
as a young person, because you were young then, like how did you get
I
through
was
it?
broke. I was broke because, and we were doing business. I did, I don't even know, like $250,000 of revenue, my first full year or my 3rd year of law school. And like nobody paid. And, I'm expanding because I want to hire somebody. I want to hire another person. And, collecting money became my full-time job.
Right.
There's a story in the book how there's one store, Conway Stores. They owed me money and they wouldn't pay. And I had to go on a Friday afternoon to Morris Cohn's office, and I took a chair and I put it in front of his door, and I wouldn't let him out of the room until he paid me. And I knew he had to leave because he had to get back. He had to get on the train to get home before sunset. And I kidnapped him. I held him hostage.
It's amazing. So
one time I went to a store in Brooklyn. They had a theft, and I walk in, and there's police cars all over the place. And, there's the yellow tape. And I walk in and I'm there to do a job, and I have to go under the yellow tape until somebody stops me. Like, what are you doing? I said, I'm here to investigate the crimes. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, there was a theft. They go, not today. There was a guy, they got robbed. They had a New York City off-duty policeman sleeping in the upstairs of the store. And they got robbed and he killed somebody. So I'm walking in and there's a body, with tape and chalk outlining the body. Right? And I would walk in and I would find heroin needles in half these stores that I went to do the work in. So,
so what? I mean, you're obviously a pioneer. Like, what was your thought process on why this should be? And I know you found your niche, but like, why did people think it mattered? Because of all these problems? Like, what was the reasoning?
Oh, Jonathan, especially back in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, you're younger than I am, so you don't really remember what New York was like. People complain about what it's like today. It's paradise today compared to what it was then. And
so it was almost like a necessity that was needed.
It was a must-have. It was a culture.
But it wasn't around.
We would give these lie detector tests to kids, and we would ask them questions. Do you steal? Of course. Do you take drugs? Of course. Do you sneak on the subway? Who doesn't? It wasn't like I was asking them about, this moral dilemma.
Right.
This was just the way they were raised.
Right. Interesting. So
we have the same problem today. The MTA loses $1 billion on fare beating.
But what was the moment you said this is a thing? Because it wasn't existing.
So, well, it did exist. There were other people,
but not mainstream. It wasn't a large industry at that point.
So look, I never really thought about that until years later. Okay. When I was giving lie detector tests, I was just, because of my DNA, I was like, okay, they're $35 and we did 60 of them today. So we billed out, almost $2,000. Right. It was a $2,000 day. And, I understood my margin. It was not a complex business. There was 3 of us and, a receptionist and a rent at $450 a month. And it would be like, okay, I understood. I knew at the end of the month how much money I made, like within a minute of, the month ending.
Yeah.
It was a very simple business.
Precise.
But you fast forward many years later, and there's a chapter in the book about this, about, statistics and measuring. But we were able to ascertain that 1 in every 10 applicants for a job had a criminal conviction. And once we were able to run that data and figure that out, successfully over an extended period of time, is when I said to my wife, okay, we're on to something. Like if 1 out of every 10 people that applies for a job, you know, is a criminal, that means 1 out of every 10 people for every company that doesn't screen has
Right.
people working for them that in one way, shape, or form, you know,
And you
have
didn't really have like the internet. You didn't have the tools we have
no,
today.
no, 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 no.
So
There
how
was no
did you
internet. We had to
develop
drive.
this? How
We had
did
to
you
drive.
develop this to make like a corporation actually feel you have enough data to even know, or was it more of the pretense to the data buildup?
It was the pretense. You had jewelers, whether it worked or not, they had to do something. You had retailers, whether it worked or not, they had to do something. They had to do, pilferage was such an enormous, enormous component of their business. And you think about jewelry manufacturers, diamond manufacturers, banks. These people were, they were
Interesting.
paranoid about this. They knew this was a real, real problem that they had to combat. And then when I started to get to semi-scale, I started to be able to produce, documented, numbers around the thesis, and that woke everybody up.
It's amazing. And then you start scaling it past that. So, you finally find, and again, you were pivoting the whole time, right? I mean, you obviously went through where a law changed that you couldn't even do your business. So when that happened, when they said no more polygraphs, you could have just packed up and went away.
Everybody did, by the way. Every single competitor in my industry. I'm not kidding. Everyone except me quit.
So okay, great statistic. Why? What was in you where that was the actual result for real? Because this is where people. Because I feel so bad. I know so many smart, enterprising, brilliant, like intelligent people that just quit before it actually happens. Like what drove you past that barrier?
So, first of all of my competitors were retired policemen. So they
Okay.
weren't real sophisticated businesses.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was a kid. Right. And I didn't have a choice. I had to make it work. And I talk about this throughout my career to everybody that I've ever hired. Failure is not an option. Right? When failure is not an option, you break through walls and you knock down, barriers and obstacles, and you just fight your way
Our
through it.
partner and I are constantly saying failure is not an option.
It's just not.
Because what it does is and first of all, I say this in other podcasts, like I even hate the word failure because like I feel that the moment you learn whatever that was is where you pivot to normally where you go. And if you look at every startup that's ever been created, it never ends what it started out as, ever. It's
No.
always morphed because they were never afraid to pivot. And the failure was a lesson. It wasn't a disaster moment.
We had a sign in our conference room for many years. It said, "Success is just like failure, and failure is no success at all."
Love it. Love it.
And
Hope that's
and
in your
and
book.
and we live by that.
I love it. So, all right. So, it's rapidly growing. What was the moment where you said, I can be in Asia? I can, like now scaling to different countries is not an easy thing. You need people everywhere. How many employees did you have at the height of like your momentum, and how did you deal with, the scaling effect of that in a positive way? And what were the challenges?
So I had 8,000 employees in 20 cities in 10 countries.
Oh my God.
All right. So one of the challenges was that I wound up in the hospital with a heart attack.
Oh my God.
But that was many years later, but it was a culmination of what the strain and what the travel and what the lack of sleep and what the difficulty of every day was. And it just
Every
is what
day
it is.
sucks. Every day sucks.
Look, one day we had a company sponsored event in India, picnic. People brought their families. One couple turned their head for a second. There was a river, baby in the river, 2-year-old,
Oh
died.
my God. Oh my God.
Um, Early on in my career, when I went to return a leased car that we used as a company car for special jobs, I gave it back and there were 4 bullet holes in the trunk.
Oh my God.
Right? Another time, we were doing a surveillance on one of my clients. We would say yes to everything because we were scrappy.
Right.
So one of my clients said, "My wife is cheating on me. Do you do surveillance?" I'm like, "Sure, of course." I didn't do surveillance. I called, same guy, Vic Kaufman. I'm like, "Give me a cop. I need somebody to do this for me."
Right.
And this guy goes and does the surveillance. Guess what? He was right. His wife was cheating on him. They go to this motel. He's got my car and my giant camcorder. And he's filming the guy walk into the hotel. He's filming him close the blinds. And he's sitting there. 5 minutes later, the guy comes out with a baseball bat and starts smashing the car. And my guy puts it in reverse to leave, but for whatever reason, decided not to, and he put it into drive, and he ran the guy over.
Oh my God. So just crazy stories every day in countries everywhere. You're running around. You did it. Obviously, you had this unfortunate thing happen to you with the heart attack. And then, so how did that change your perspective? And what year was that?
I had the heart attack. It was 2000 and when were the London Olympics? It was 2012.
Okay. And then when did you finally sell this company?
I still haven't.
Okay.
I still haven't finally sold it.
Okay.
The company was purchased about 2 months ago by First Advantage, which was a competitor of ours.
Got it.
It's a public company. We were a public company.
Got it.
And I'm still one of the largest shareholders in the combined business.
Oh, that's great. So you went from a paper route to a public company, 8,000 people, lots of challenges, problems. If you talk about the myth of overnight success, which is a podcast theme, I mean, you're the perfect example. You're talking 50 years of complete grind. And
correct.
I want to segue because, and first of all, what an amazing story. And what I love about the stories, it's all these little stupid shit, excuse my language on my own podcast, I'll probably have to bleep that out, that you talk about. It's not this sophisticated story that everyone thinks. It's just you were not afraid to stop and think about things that weren't going right and trying to make them be right. So congratulations.
Yeah, it was not. I say this to people all the time. This was not a startup. Okay. This was a job.
Right.
Okay. And then it became a business.
Right.
And then it became a company.
Yeah. No, listen, over years, 20, 30 years. All right. So, okay. So obviously you're still involved in this. You're doing this investing thing, which, I know you want to be around young, enterprising people. You're always so helpful to everyone. I know that, you come around and you associate yourself with. A book. Like why even do a book? Especially and the title's so good because there's always, you're allowed to have things that aren't going well as much as you're allowed to have things going well. And to actually just say to yourself that part of my day can suck, but that doesn't mean it's the whole day, right? So talk a little bit about your book, why you wrote it, and maybe the 3-4 most valuable lessons from it.
So let's just talk about the title for a second.
Yes.
Because I'm an upbeat, optimistic, extraordinarily happy individual.
Okay.
Right? Life's been great.
Terrific.
Right? I am so blessed.
Yep.
But every day did suck. And every night I would come home, and I'm married, I'll be married 43 years this year.
Yep.
And, I got engaged at 24.
Yeah.
But every night I would come home and my wife would say to me, "How was work today?" And I would say it sucked. Why? And I would tell her something that went bad. And every Friday she would say to me, "How was the week?" And I would say, "Not bad." And at the end of every month, she would say, "How was the month?" And I would say, "Best month we ever had."
All right. So talk us through that, because
that was a true theme for 45 straight years. We grew every month, every quarter, every year. with the exception of the great financial crisis and
Yeah.
COVID, in normal environments,
Yeah.
we just grew the company.
So talk about that. Like, how can every day suck and you still have a good perspective the next day to actually answer at the end of every week and every month that, wow, it's not so bad? Like, how do you survive life that way?
It's just the same exact thesis that I had when we were doing 60 polygraph tests. I knew how much revenue we did. I knew what my costs were. I knew what my overhead was, and I knew how much money I was making. And
But
yeah,
but every
it
day,
was a
does that mean the
grind.
whole day? Like, because like again, I know that you could have felt that, but like, what kept you going then? Because listen, if you're not feeling good and you're depleting yourself, it's very hard to keep going.
I'll take you back to college.
Okay.
And this is really, my personality. If you want to go out with a girl and you don't ask 10, you're not getting a date.
Right.
So if 3 out of 10 girls said yes to you, you're in the Hall of Fame.
Right. So you're saying it was more sucks means rejection?
But in some cases you're
Does it
pitching a big piece
mean
of business
just
and
too many
somebody else
problems?
wanted. Sometimes the landlord would come to you and tell you there's a clause in your lease that says we can now raise your rent by 14% because it's tied to a porter's wage formula. And you go, what the hell is a porter's wage formula? And I know you know what that is.
I love those clauses. Those are my favorite clauses.
I hate them. I never signed one again after that experience. It was unbelievable. But there was always something. We had one landlord who didn't supply toilet paper. We'd had to go buy toilet paper ourselves and put it because he saved money on the big building. So there was something going on, little nuggets of real life that went on all the time.
All right. So if
But
every
you
day,
fight your way through it,
right?
because look, you got a business, and
But what did you love enough? What did you love enough to fight your way through it? People. Was it the actual what the business was? What, like, you still had to have something that guided you to keep going.
I loved selling.
So you did. So that's what it is.
I
You
loved
love the
selling.
sale. You love the sale.
Loved winning.
Winning. Okay.
Loved winning.
Okay.
Okay. And I got just as bummed out for losing $1,000 opportunity as I did for $100,000 opportunity or $1 million opportunity. I loved winning, and I hated losing a client.
Love it. And it's like sports, right? I mean, they grind it out way more than we see for that one day or that one game or that one at bat or that one shot. And, it's all about winning and producing.
Shooters shoot.
Yes.
We built a shooters culture.
I love it.
At its peak, we had 165 salespeople. And, look, early in my career, I was in this, it was called Tech at the time. It was a peer mentoring group similar to YPO. And there were 12 of us. And I was continuing to hire salespeople.
Yeah.
And every one of the folks that was in the group would be like, you're taking too much risk. You're not going to make any money if you hire that two salespeople. And I'll be like, on the contrary, you guys are going to be stale. If you don't invest in your businesses, if you don't take at least half of what you made the year before and invest it back in your business, you're going to not grow. And if you don't grow, you're dying. And I believe that to my core. You have to be growing because your costs go up. If you stay the same, you're losing.
Totally.
All right.
I agree.
So listen, John, almost my entire career, I invested every nickel, not half, every nickel we made back into the business.
Well, because you believed in it and you knew that you had a growth mindset,
And I was a debt-averse individual at the time. So it was growing. You needed to feed the beast.
Yeah, and you didn't want to take on a lot of debt.
I didn't take on any debt forever.
That's great.
Until we entered into the private equity world and we started making acquisitions.
Right. Well, then you need to do that. So, okay, you're still in it. You obviously made a beautiful sale to a great company.
Wait, I didn't answer your question. I'm sorry about why the book.
Yeah.
So our last private equity investor was Goldman Sachs. And we had a guy on the board. His name was Mike Grebe. And Mike and I got along famously, but he looked at me, and he was a corporate guy. He was in big companies. He had big jobs
Yeah.
in real, Fortune 100 businesses, and that was his DNA.
Yeah.
And he looked at me like I was a reckless cowboy. He was like, "Oh my God, I never met anybody like you," and he would say that to my face. But we became very close. And as I was winding down, as I was replacing myself as CEO, and we were preparing to go public, and I was no longer going to be on the board, he said to me, "Billy, you have to write a book, and you have to write it now. The stories are amazing. The life lessons are incredible. Your ability to articulate verbally, I imagine you'll be able to translate this into literature, and do it right away when you're fresh."
Yeah.
And he introduced me to a woman who helped me write the book.
Great.
And look, the book started, I have the manuscript here behind me.
Yeah.
As a memoir.
Oh my God.
It was 770 pages. And,
a lot of trees.
My kids read it.
Yeah.
And they were both like, "Dad, this sucks." And I'm like, "Why?" They go, "Nobody cares how you met Mom." All right?
Right.
But there's a great business book here. Spend the next few months editing it down and just getting the stories that you want to convey to young, aspiring entrepreneurs. And then we had instead of it being a memoir, like we did in business often, we shifted. We had a pivot. And I pivoted to have a strategy. I say this all the time. A CEO's job is easy. You set the strategy, you allocate the capital, you hire great people, and you work unmercifully every day to make those people better. If you do that, you need luck and you need wind to be in your favor.
You need to stay in it long enough for the wind to blow. Like it's longevity, it's time, right?
Look, Malcolm Gladwell had a chapter in his book. He talked about it, many, many years ago, about 10,000 hours.
Yes.
The Beatles were not an overnight sensation. They played in Hamburg for 10 years.
No one is. And usually the ones that are, it doesn't last because it's just a phenomenon. It's just hard. So I want to ask a few more questions before we go. By the way, everything sucks. Sold on Amazon. Where's this thing sold?
On Amazon Kindle.
Amazon Kindle. Is it going to be in stores or hard?
Well, I haven't not developed the strategy. I didn't do it for, to create a commercial endeavor. My goal is to get it into business schools and undergraduate business programs.
Okay.
For young people to read and understand what it really takes. So,
all right.
Part of this winter is going to be a marketing campaign aimed at, professors and deans of business schools to get it in front of.
Here you go, finding a niche. You find your niches like in everything you've done. So a couple more questions. AI, data privacy, security, cyber. With your industry, where is this going? I mean, like you would think that it's going to morph into something different. I think at this point with
everything. The one thing that's constant.
Will your industry even be necessary? With AI,
we will be the AI for the industry.
Okay, so you're working on AI. Are you working on all these?
Those 8,000 people.
And how
need 8,000 people
with now the models and obviously we're ChatGPT was like the wake up moment. Like even with this podcast, like I found a lot about you just by using the different platforms and asking it questions that. Make it.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's
we didn't talk about this, but one of the pivot points in the business was our dedication to technology. When I retired, we had 665 engineers. Okay. If you don't spend time on automation, on technology, on building integrations, on building successful platforms, no business in the world that becomes successful in the foreseeable future, because I can't think out past 10 years because life changes so fast,
Yeah,
will prosper, will scale, will grow, will be successful without immense amounts of
So
technical.
being not a technology person, how the heck did you even understand what you didn't know?
I hired it. And there's a chapter in the book called Epiphany on the Fairway.
Okay.
When my son Brandon was 10 years old, we were walking down the first fairway at Mountain Ridge. And you've played golf with me, so you're gonna laugh at the statement. I said to him, Brandon, I'm gonna win the club championship. And he said to me, Dad, how are you gonna do that? You stink. I said, I'm gonna hire somebody to hit irons for me, I'm gonna hire somebody to drive for me, and I'm gonna hire somebody to putt for me. And I'm going to win the club championship. And I was not going to hire pros. I was going to get somebody in the club.
Right.
I was going to have Hollander, putt.
Right.
I was going to have, Rob Wolf hit the drive, and,
Yep.
and we'd never lose. And then he was like, why don't I do that at work? Why don't I just find extraordinary people that know so much more than me at everything? And I did it.
And what made you all of a sudden have that epiphany? And why didn't you do it before?
I don't know.
Were you just because you didn't want to delegate?
I don't know.
Really?
I can't answer the question. It was like, wow, that's brilliant.
That's a lot of engineers. Listen, it's a very exciting time. It's going to be a weird time because I think this is way more than people are ready for at this point on, how do you, once these, I almost feel like we're at hello, you've got mail. Because remember Facebook came on the scene. When you first got a computer, it was DOS. You had to know how to.
Listen, John, I'm on the board of NYU Medical Center. I went to a board meeting yesterday. They had a presentation by neurosurgeons. They told me, and they showed me how it's going to be done, that within the next 60 months, you're going to be able to do brain surgery sitting at your desk in your house, and the patient is going to be anywhere in the world.
That's amazing.
Right? Medicine is going to advance so much.
Well,
through
and
the
even
utilization of AI.
I'm hoping though it's pre what we get. I think if AI gets to where it can in the healthcare industry, and it can now look at more data than it's ever looked, you're hoping it's preventative, not after, right? Because right now we have
things change. They will always be bad.
Right.
80% of the world is good. 20% of the world is bad. And we just got to keep doing good every single day. And
well, I think you have a great family. You're a good man. All your friends, whenever I ask about you, you're a real friend. So I want to thank you for doing this. I'm so glad you wrote the book. Everyone should read it. It's just great, just factual, straight up lessons. So
straight up
yes,
lessons.
We appreciate your time here, and everyone's going to enjoy this episode. Hi, John Schultz here. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Would really appreciate it if you would like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. Looking forward to being with you soon.